Hello and welcome to my channel on human design. Primarily this video is going to be about conditioning, but I did have a question in from a quadruple right that I wanted to address. So we'll start with that one from Zain Zuma. This is their question. Hi Richard, I have a question related to being quad right and regulating your nervous system. I struggle a lot with self-regulation and notice I have a lot of trouble in letting go of my unhealthy behaviors around food. I'm so easily overwhelmed. Noise can be too much, light can overwhelm me, big crowds can overwhelm me, and I notice that I brace myself a lot of times and there is a lot of tension in my body. Okay, I'm going to just answer that part of the question first of all, Zane. You're a 1-3, so a natural insecurity is there. You have a sense of judgment. In other words, you're tuning into what you want to take in, what you don't want to take in, and it's in a kind of cyclic movement of connected to the solar plex. So obviously crowds are going to overwhelm you. When it all comes in, you can be easily conditioned through the open solar plex and the open will, and it's just overwhelming. On top of that, we have a blending caves environment. So you're not designed to be going out into big crowds anyway. It's too much. You need to be within your own cave where security is important. So it makes sense that you're going to brace yourself, before something happens or you think something is going to happen. This is just very natural. And regarding the nature of your chart, if you look closely at your chart, you'll see there is no completely red channel anywhere. So if we look at your chart separate from the red and the black, the unconscious and the conscious, the unconscious is tied to the body and there is no anchor to hold to. So yes, when there's lots of people around, again, you feel like a leaf on the wind. There isn't really a strong connection into the body itself. That would explain a lot of what you've just described. Let's go on. I don't like labels, but around 2020 to 2021, they diagnosed me with ADAD and ASS. I sort of understand where this is coming from, but I'd very much like to know how I can help myself to regulate more healthily. Okay, I don't like labels either, and we're talking about cognitive decline, something that isn't usually experienced till later on in age. And we're also talking about muscle and lung issues. So regarding the lung issues, again, lung is one of the biological correlations to the open solar plex. So if I were you, I'd be looking at the conditioning around gate 49. What are you rejecting? What are you not dealing with at an emotional level? Are you going out of your way to try to keep the peace, and get overwhelmed by strong emotions? That's something I would look at. The cognitive memory, you've got an open head and open eyes now, same as me. Ideas come and go. You don't have a brilliant memory. Neither do I. I have a pretty good memory for charts, but not much else. So I don't like labels, and I don't think you should be tied to them unless you can do something about it. So don't take them too seriously is what I would say. And going back to your question, I also used to do a lot of intense sports like Zumba and kickbox, and I am happy to have realized my body really hated that. Yeah, I bet it did. But if that is because of my receptive body or because I'm eating too little, I can't tell. I hear many people say that when you're quad right, you don't need so much food. And that truly installed some fear in me that I'm eating too much and will gain weight. Although my realistic mind knows that's actually a good thing. I would be really grateful for some advice from your perspective on my chart. Okay, so not to eat too much. I mean, you've got the 32 line 1. So this is the gate of continuity. And it's kind of fear about the continuation of the body. basically. It's the only fear that is there. You know, will my body hold up? You know, will there be a continuous connection in my relationships? Will I have a job that will last a long time? All these things are issues that come up and fears that come up around that. In the exaltation of gate 32, line 1, there is detailed attention to the process of whatever's going on. And when we look at detail, or when I think about detail in your chart, I think about the gate of details in the 62, a logical gate. I look at the ability you have in the 9th gate to be able to focus on the small details. And I'm thinking, well, maybe you are paying too much attention to what's going on with the body because you don't feel connected to it so much. And this is blowing things out of proportion. I mean, you've got a resilient body. You've got a 3rd line body. We can get through a lot of things. You know, it's not a body that falls down easily. It mutates. I mean, I've got one myself. It's amazing what I've lived through and come out absolutely fine. So I wouldn't be too worried about it if I were you. Regarding how much to eat, you do have an adrenalized sacral, and you do need a variety of different foods, including protein and carbohydrates and, you know, other things that are needed to give you the power that you need. The 9th gate especially is highlighted as needing meat, or at least strong protein, or at least enough protein in the diet. So I wouldn't be worried about eating too much. You've got yourself over anxious about stuff that I wouldn't be over anxious about if I were you. You know, you're going to evolve as you go. You know, you're quite young at the moment, and it takes time. So don't get overwhelmed by the fear that they dump on you, by your own fear of worried about what's going to go on with the body. Just live your life. You know, eat enough. When you've eaten enough and you're not hungry anymore, stop eating. It's not like you're going to put on huge amounts of weight, and you sound like you need to put on some weight. It's good that you've stopped the intense exercise in kickboxing and Zumba, but how to regulate it? Well, exercise is good. A lot of right bodies tell me that they like cycling or jumping on a rebounder a couple of 100 times, something like that, something more gentle. Stretching, working with yoga, working with Tai Chi or something like this would be good for you. Regarding how you take in the food, this is where your focus on detail can get in the way. You're not here to focus on the food as you're eating it. You know, it's got to taste right to you, and you have a kind of a fixed menu within you where you want to eat mainly the same things. And that's quite natural, but you don't need to pay too much attention to the food. This is why I'm bringing up the details in you at the gate level can then turn on, because of your fear, into being about, you know, should I be eating this? Am I eating too much? You know, what it should be and all the rest of it. No, just, you know, close your eyes with the first mouthful. I always advise is a good idea. Reconnect. You know, it's inner vision. It's moving pictures. It's connecting to that inner eye that sees. It's not about you looking out. It's looking in. It's inner vision. You know, if you like the taste of the food and you feel secure in your environment, you're probably going to be quite happy. And if you're having enough protein and you're taking in enough food, then the body will be stronger. It seems quite simple to me. It's your fear that's getting in the way. That's what I reckon. And in this very quick look at your chart, I hope I've given you some idea of how to approach it. Hope that's been useful. Thank you for your question. Now, let's have a look at conditioning. The first question on conditioning comes from Maria Barefoot. This is her question. Confusion over conditioning. I came over from the book of letters, which I'm reading with both pleasure and confusion. I do have many questions as the book is quite complex, just as life itself. I accept that some things will be understood in due time, But there is one thing I think would be helpful to understand now. Ra writes about the open throat and how it will be conditioned by the person one is in auric contact with. His example is two lovers in conversation. Ra says that the open throat will be talking with the voices that the other person has through their gates. What happens to their own gates in this situation? Are they overruled by the other person's gates? If so, when will the defined gates in an open throat be expressed? Or does this only apply with completely open throats with no gates defined? What about the other centers? I am confused. Could you also elaborate on how condition happens between open and defined centers, especially when it comes to the gates? It would be very helpful. Okay, Maria, so again, this is what human design education is all about. You're going into the nature of the gates, you're going into the nature of the centers. You understand that if you've got gates in an open center, they are waiting to be activated. And as soon as they're activated by someone with a fixed throat, for example, yes, you will be taking in the conditioning from the other. Let's say they've got the 1762. There is that rational side that will come out, but also the gates that have been waiting to be connected, they also have their own history. They also have their own experience. They also have their own phrases, and they will come up as well. Regarding speaking in someone else's voice, as in the two lovers example that Ra used, it's mainly with a completely open throat, because then there's no filter at all. Then you can actually speak in the other person's voice, and you will do if that is the case, as those viewers of you who have a completely open throat can attest to. Is that not the case? So primarily with a completely open throat in the answer to that one. But of course, if you're around someone a lot and you've got an open throat, let's say they're a partner or they're in your family, then yes, you will be conditioned again and again by the way that person expresses themselves. And no doubt you will take some of the way they express themselves in the way that you express yourself, simply because you're hearing it all the time, being conditioned by it all the time, and wanting to communicate them, wanting to attract attention in the way that they can understand it. So that's all I'll say about the gates and conditioning at the moment, apart from the fact that if you want to know what the difference is, and I spent a long time trying to express that, and I've done that in my advanced report, which is about 150 or so pages, depending on your design. But basically, every gate is described, whether it's in a defined or an undefined center, and whether it's black or whether it's red. 4 different descriptions for the same gate. And it took quite a lot of internal wrangling with in order to get to that point. I haven't seen that in any other report because it did take me a long time, and not everybody can do it or knows enough to be able to do it. So if you get an advanced report, you'll see for yourself the way that I describe what's in you, whether it's in a defined or an undefined center in relation to the gates. So that should clear that up for you pretty quickly. All right, thank you for that question. And now the needle of the eye asks a question also on conditioning, and this is where we get into the different levels of conditioning. Here's their question. I still have a question around conditioning because it seems to me that this one word points to at least 2 quite different processes. On the one hand, there is the conditioning of a homogenized society that can be dropped when we follow our strategy and inner authority. In that case, we are waking up from the collective sleep or nightmare driven by strong culture and economic forces. This is the conditioning that both can and should be left behind, individually and hopefully collectively. I can see a possible future in which the ideal of equality is rooted in the unique value each person brings to the whole, and the educational work you do explaining the science of differentiation in such a vivid way brings that vision closer. Well, thank you, the needle of the eye. I do want to help that process. On the other hand, there seems to be conditioning of a different kind, energetic conditioning from the planets and human auras. From what I understand so far, this planetary and auric weather cannot simply be dropped. The most we can do is avoid remaining ignorant of it and instead wake up to an awareness that includes this conditioning rather than imagining it can be removed. Is that correct? Are we here primarily to discern it rather than move beyond it? Okay, so let me deal with those 2 points first. Yes, there is conditioning from the culture, there is conditioning from the parents, there's conditioning from our nurturing as we are growing up. You know, we're like sponges taking in everything. And we're taking in everything according to other people. We haven't yet found our own perspective on it. And things build up if we don't know any different. And the society especially can condition us in certain ways. So yes, that needs to be dropped, but it will be dropped when you come home to yourself, when you're operating according to your own strategy and in inner authority. It's no longer going to fit. You will become more available to a bigger scope of living because you won't be held back by that conditioning. But it's something that drops when you see it, when you recognize it in action. But that's something that gets dropped when you travel, you know, and then you've got another culture to compare to the one that you've come from, and then you go to another, and then you go to another, and you begin to see what is the general conditioning. And it doesn't have to be specific to any one society. So yes, that you can move on from that and move into your own life according to who you are. Now, when we come to the auric conditioning, you're right, there is nothing we can do about it. Our auras overlap, you know. If you're within 15 feet of somebody, then you're going to be affected by what they have that you do not have. And the conditioning from humans is basically to see, look, it's not you. You know, I'm an unemotional design. If I'm making an emotional decision based on how other people are feeling, then I'm not following my own splenic generated response, you know, and you get to learn that through the experiment over time. So the knowledge is useful. The experience of that is useful. Coming back to your own inner authority is the way through it all, and staying with that. And that's the same for any of the open centers. You get to know about them because of the people you meet that have the centers and the gates that you don't have. You get to know the difference between you and them. So if you're taking in something that isn't in you, and if you're sleeping in your own aura, so you're not being affected by someone when you're actually unconscious, then it becomes even easier. You become familiar with your own aura. You become more attentive about what's coming in that is different from you. And over time, that simply gets easier. You're not so conditioned because you have a much clearer sense of who you are, which is what human design is all about. Now, for the final part of your question, this leads to a practical question about the bigger cycles. I was very puzzled to see how my chart appears to transform when the planetary program is included, for example, around the Uranus opposition. I'm still unsure of how to read all those blue lines in the transit descriptions. Are these lines describing forms of conditioning? Are they part of the NotSelf, or are they something else? I do not understand this from the metaphor of weather and the metaphor of another costume laid over the imprint we carry from birth also is not entirely clear to me. I'm wondering what a correct attitude toward these blue lines might be, given that they seem to add and demand so much from us. Okay, so the larger cycles give you a framework for that particular cycle. So as an example, let's say you're a 5-1 profile, but in your Uranus opposition, you've got a 2-4 profile over you. So the 5-1, the heretic investigator, the transpersonal one is out there doing their thing, saving people or being blamed by them. And then you move into this cycle where it's a 2-4 profile. You'll find there are more fringes that come in because of the 4th line. You'll find that you'll want to withdraw from people more because of the 2nd line, you know, and you want to play more, you know, you don't want things to be so heavy. So it's very much noticing that within that particular cycle, it's not your profile, but it's the way to be during that cycle, to get to know what it is to be like a 2-4. So you're not a 2-4, but at the same time, the attributes of the 2-4 will be happening to you during this cycle. And are the big cycles showing up the NotSelf? The transit is going to bring activation to open centers, let's say. So if you've got an open will center and the transit is bringing you an activation to the will, it's not like your will becomes defined, but your will certainly be challenged, and you wanting to be willful in that particular way. So for example, let's say the 3740 comes into the Uranus opposition cycle. This will tend to have you wanting to be part of something more than yourself, you know, whether that be a family or a team or a group or whatever it may be, something that you weren't involved with before. So it's not you, but you can learn from that experience. If it's an educational channel, then you'll learn from that experience. You'll learn what it's like to support your team or your family or your friends. You will also learn, if you're incorrect and the test fails, you'll find yourself over-delivering and doing lots and lots of things for people, probably for no money, and getting exhausted and wondering why you're bothering. So it can be used for you to actually see where you are in relationship to your open will. Very often the cycles do bring us certain educational channels, what we can really learn from them, but it's not you. It's not like you have a fixed will. So yes, it's the weather. It's the weather that's coming to you. So in this particular case, you are going to be involved with other people, whether you like it or not. If you've got a 2-4 profile and you've got the 4037, that's going to happen. That's the weather that's coming. And you will experience it, and you'll move through that transit and into another one. So there you go. Thank you very much for that question. So we've looked at society conditioning and our nurturing. We've looked at the auric conditioning from other people. We've looked at the planet conditioning when the daily cycles come through. That's why I do the daily impact report every day. And that's also where the larger planetary cycles come in that actually bring the weather, lay out the kind of things you're going to encounter as you go through that cycle. So thank you for the question, and I hope that's been helpful. For those of you that don't know, my website is human.design, and there is a lot of new information on there that I've recently put up, which I think you'll find very interesting and illuminating. So do check that out. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And I shall be back again very soon with something completely different. See you then. Bye.